Okay, let's dive right into this. Today in our explainer, we're unpacking one of the absolute most fascinating demographic shifts of the modern era, India's plummeting death rate. It's a massive story of human triumph, sweeping systemic changes, and how a whole nation basically rewrote its survival odds in just a few generations.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The plunge is staggering. We're talking a drop from 42.6 all the way down to 7.48. That's the number of deaths per 1,000 people, and this drop happened between 1901 and 2011. Going from losing over 42 people per thousand to just over 7, that is a massive, massive shift in human history. So how exactly did such a dramatic life-saving improvement actually happen?
The divergence is striking, right? Notice how that blue death rate line just steeply plummets away from the pink birth rate line over the decades? It creates this massive gap, especially right after 1921. And this gap? Well, it's the anchor for our whole investigation today. What exact forces pushed that blue line down so effectively while the birth rate stayed relatively high?
To figure this out, we're going to systematically uncover the drivers behind this decline across 5 key areas: medical triumphs, the power of education, sustaining life, social shifts, and finally, the demographic aftermath.
Let's start with number 1, medical triumphs.
So for centuries, populations everywhere were just absolutely devastated by historical killers, and India was no exception. We're talking massive, terrifying outbreaks of plague, cholera, malaria, smallpox, and tuberculosis. But thanks to a huge, widespread increase in medical and health facilities across the country, these mass casualty epidemics, they've almost been completely eradicated. And obviously, stopping these diseases at the source immediately slashed the mortality rate.
But you know, the medical victories went way beyond just stopping contagious diseases. Expanding health facilities had a direct impact on the incredibly vulnerable period of childbirth. Over time, the tragic rate of women dying during maternity, the maternal mortality rate, has steeply declined. Better medical access literally meant protecting mothers when they needed it the absolute most.
And crucially, these same medical advancements safely shepherded the youngest generation into the world. Back in 1951, the infant mortality rate was a heartbreaking 146 per thousand. But watch this drop. By 2002, it fell to 64. And by 2011, it was down to 47 per thousand. Better medical facilities literally saved generations of babies. It's a real game changer for the country's demographic landscape.
Which brings us to our second category, the power of education. It turns out education is a literal lifesaver. Increasing literacy really helped people understand how to take much better care of their own lives and, of course, the daily needs of their kids. By building a solid educational foundation, society helped people escape dangerous blind faith, superstitious beliefs, and just general ignorance. Essentially, education replaced all of that with actionable, life-saving knowledge about personal health, and there's a very specific, compounding relationship at play here. The sources explicitly note that improvement in literacy among women has also resulted in better care for infants. Think about it. When mothers are educated, they're so much better equipped to navigate things like hygiene, nutrition, and early symptom detection. This directly accelerated that massive plunge in infant mortality we were just talking about.
Now, let's move on to Category 3, sustaining life.
Historically, the number of children and women dying from malnutrition and general ill health was staggeringly high. It was a huge problem. But as education spread, it created greater awareness about health and nutrition, and these tragic deaths were successfully brought under control. A really prime example of this is the government introducing targeted initiatives, like the midday meal program in schools, to make sure vulnerable children were consistently fed a nutritious diet.
Now, here's a really fascinating macro-level shield that was added a bit more recently. In 2005, the National Disaster Management Authority, or NDMA, was officially constituted. This structural intervention was specifically designed to mitigate all types of natural disasters. So instead of vulnerable populations being totally wiped out by extreme weather with zero warning, there's now a coordinated system in place. And that has vastly reduced the loss of lives from natural calamities.
Okay, Category 4, social shifts.
Alongside medicine and education, the sources identify a fascinating combination of other life-saving factors working in the background. Things like social reforms, which helped remove harmful traditional practices, or rapid urbanization, which suddenly gave millions of people much closer access to centralized resources in hospitals. Add an overall improved standard of living and massive publicity campaigns spreading health awareness to remote areas, and you have a perfect storm. Together, these macro-social shifts empowered the average Indian to not just survive, but actively thrive.
Finally, we arrive at Category 5, the demographic aftermath.
Look, saving lives is an absolute triumph of human ingenuity and policy. There is zero doubt about it. But when you couple a rapidly falling death rate with a birth rate that remains stubbornly high, it triggers a massive demographic transition. It leads to what economists call a population explosion. Basically, it's a situation where population growth outpaces the economic development and infrastructure growth of the entire country.
You can really feel the reality of this transition on the ground. Imagine a typical scene back in 1961, maybe a vehicle traveling with a manageable number of passengers. But fast forward 50 years, after this massive decline in mortality, and that exact same vehicle is overflowing. It perfectly captures how a phenomenally successful, low death rate visibly crowded the nation, putting vastly increased pressure on land, agriculture, and everyday infrastructure.
So India successfully fought off epidemics, educated its citizens, fed its kids, and conquered high mortality. It really is a staggering historical achievement. But it leaves us with a pretty crucial question. With a massive, highly populated young workforce, what we call a demographic dividend, how will India harness this incredible human resource for its future economic growth? Can they turn a population explosion into their greatest competitive advantage? It's definitely something to think about.